The bodies were like couplets intertwined, and the river crisscrossed a border between two states built along thoughts on linguistic states. The camp director had warned the participants of the translation workshop that spirits of other participants could leap into theirs, and each of them were given aliases like a plastic steering oar that never yields to either streams of the river. The poets claimed that to be baptized in a form of poetry in another language, it was necessary to nosedive into a particular river. Some of the translators were also language teachers. They allegedly danced on the hanging bridge, hoping that their students weren't around. Another prospective reason for the onset of the wrangle was that poets demanded dope during their short recesses. They insisted that poems be written and consumed in the same tongue, like dope bought directly from the source before being chopped. Some poets may have died due to narcotic overdose, can only be confirmed after autopsy reports are made public.
Chandramohan S is a Dalit Indian poet, short story writer, and a social critic based in the South Indian state of Kerala. He's pursuing research in mathematics, apart from being a translator, editor, and a social activist. Chandramohan, when do you sleep? Chandramohan is a member of the P.K. Rosie Foundation, a cultural collective named after the legendary pioneering Dalit actress that seeks to demarginalize Dalit Bahujans. His poetry collections, Warscape Verses, 2014, and Letters to Namdeo Dasal, 2016, were shortlisted for the Srinivas Rayapro Poetry Prize and the Harish Govind Memorial Prize. Chandramohan coordinates English language poetry readings in Kerala, as well as a subaltern cultural collective there. In 2016, Outlook magazine listed him as Dalit Achiever of the Year. How do you sense that things right now with COVID are interacting with the, something that you and I have talked about in the past, is our worries, about the rise of the far right in India, the rise of the BJP and the sway that the Modi government has. And right now you're just seeing this interaction across the world between more authoritarian governments and this pandemic. And I'm just curious what it feels like for you.
Exactly. It's so this pandemic is a sort of insult on the injury already the Indian soul has. Already our democracy is injured, and this pandemic is like an insult to the injury. So in the sense that this current pandemic, the right-wing governments have used this current pandemic to completely silence dissent. So all these public spaces where we used to protest are like completely evicted. Like people are in there due to COVID threat. People are staying indoors due to COVID threat. But this instance has been misused. I would use the word misused by the current right-wing fascist government to like completely arrest a lot of activists in Delhi. A lot of activists who were protesting the Citizenship Amendment Act. So those were protesting a lot of unpopular policies of this current government, or the very well planned and brutal persecution of Muslims that this government was pursuing. All those protests have has been swept under the carpet, and the government is getting a free rein. Like they're able to just do what they want. And there was even a verdict today from the High Court of Kerala that all protesters have to stay indoors. Absolutely no protest is allowed. So like the responsibility to see that there are no protests in India is for the chief secretary and the DGP in the state of Kerala. That shows like how the state doesn't have doesn't have this opposition to check. Doesn't have the public who will who will enter the who will capture public spaces and question the government on various. So for example, due to COVID, probably Trump escaped an impeachment movement. Probably, I don't know. So these kind of things, so the kind of protests we've been building over long periods of time, they've like just withered out due to COVID.
So I'm curious for you how you have been engaging with this time as an artist. You're a writer, a poet, a radical, and an educator, among many other hats that you wear. How are you thinking about this time? How is it informing the work that you're doing and the work that you're making?
So there is a flip side to this pandemic, in a slightly positive sense. That there has been a tremendous increase in the online traffic. So in the last, so like a decade or so, in the last decade or so, there has been tremendous amount of democratization of our society. A tremendous amount of, what is it? I would use the word democratization. That is, like, there is huge amount of
Expression,
participation.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because of the online media space. So like a person, a writer, an activist, a young woman has this platform with her to post her opinion. Now, how much of a subversive they are for the last decade or so. So just like there was a huge increase in the online traffic, so there has been tremendous consolidation and knowledge creation from the people who have been protesting, probably the tribals, Muslims, the queer people, the entire queer community in India. All these people have used, all these sections of society have used the online media very effectively. So that aspect is accentuated now. That
Mhm.
aspect is being accentuated now. So the thing is, like right now we are in this conversation. So I was introduced to Zoom before pandemic, before this Corona epidemic. I wasn't introduced to Zoom. Now via Zoom we have like conferences in which there are aspects of Dalit politics, tribal politics, all these subversive, progressive movements get a very strong, platform to galvanize themselves. So that's something we learned during this Corona.
One thing that comes to mind for me is, we're just in the middle of these seismic cultural shifts. And one thing that I think has entered into the mainstream lexicon a lot more is this idea of solidarity. I think there's such hunger on the part of so many people to be decent, to not be the boot stepping on anybody else. And so I hear it again and again, do this in solidarity, stand in solidarity. And at the same time, and I think about this a lot in the context of South Asian communities, we're not a monolithic people. We're so divided by religion and ethnic background, by the question of, are you diasporic, are you not, what caste background are you, what class background are you, what is your relationship to gender. And so I've been interested in, for myself, in trying to think about what is solidarity if you don't actually know the textures of the life of someone, that you're trying to be in solidarity with.
Everyone who engages with the Dalit question of South Asia should think about, like, should be ready to enumerate, should be ready to deconstruct their own privileges.
Mm.
So deconstructing one's own privilege is a key to maybe the current moment in our uh, struggle for evolution. Now, in our struggle for evolution, I think one of the most important things now would be to deconstruct who we are, like, or who we are, what our concerns are, like explore intersectionality based on shared struggles, explore being intersectional based upon our shared struggles on similar trajectories of evolution between, say, for example, the Caribbean or the Afro-American or the African, or like say the Dalit question all over South India, or the Roma experiencing, I don't know, all over Europe. So it is just not about ethnicity that these people have are struggling. It's about commonality between the cultural contours they're trying to transcend.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I look up to. So but I'm very surprised that uh, uh, apart from very few instances, there has not been much solidarity between Dalits, the Dalit question in South Asia, and other struggles like Afro-American struggle or anything else. So I think, like, this free flow of knowledge, or like intelligentsia of each struggling faction engaging with each other is relatively new. Probably that's my understanding. So like it's only after the advent of the online era or the spread of information technology that we have this kind of conversation, which like people are able to access what's. So for example, there will hell lot of energy, creative energy, that can be derived from the George Floyd moment in America for the Dalit community, not just for the Dalit community, for the Muslim community who are the receiving end of police brutality all over South Asia.
Oh, absolutely.
But this kind of free flow of information was missing till about a decade ago.
Well, actually, I think that I think you're not wrong. I think everything you've said resonates with me. One thing that I found very inspiring and moving, that I only learned in the last couple of years was, there was a conversation in the middle of the 20th century, in particular between Dalit leadership and the Black American civil rights leadership. So Ambedkar was in conversation with W.E. like Du Bois. Like there was and there was this, exactly as you've perceived, there was this perceived correctly commonality in the struggles, of these two oppressed underclasses, and these two movements, these two leaders, like wrote letters to each other, and shared strategy, expressed support. And when I read these letters, I thought, how did I not know about this? No history book ever taught me this, and I think one of the reasons that I'm interested and I'm part of this, project with SAG, the SAG anthology, the South Asian Avant-Garde anthology, is an explicit part of the project is this desire to excavate history and better understand our own histories. And I think that I think it's absolutely essential, in my opinion, to have an internationalist solidarity, on the left, and to kind of keep, the way I think about it for myself is, my loyalty and my solidarity is always with people, never with states, first and foremost. And everywhere in the world, there are oppressed people who are often oppressed by the same kind of like interlinking order, of like dominant countries and states meets racial capitalism. So thank you for saying that. I'm curious, what does it mean to you to deconstruct one's own privilege? Does it mean being aware of it? Does it mean being aware of it and then giving it away and keeping less for yourself? What does it look like to you to see it well done?
I think the process of, so what happens is one's privilege most of the time cataracts one's vision. So we are privileged, like the aspects of that privilege results in a form of cataract. So we just certain aspects that are in the neighborhood of that privilege. Now that aspects that emanate or are a result of that privilege, we refuse to see. Unless we meet in life somebody who didn't have that and compare ourselves with him. But such moments may be very very rare, in which we stop and think about what we have, something like that. So my modus operandi sort of thing, what I would suggest and keep on the table while deconstructing one's own privilege is that to illuminate as many blind spots we may have due to our privileges. So eliminating blind spot is like we are aware of all that, and I will apply to this dictum that it wasn't my fault that I was born into privilege, but it is my fault that I do not acknowledge it.
I'm curious about, for people watching this, are there writers working right now that, in South Asia or part of the South Asian diaspora who you're very excited about, whose work you've been reading that you feel moved by or excited by or stimulated by? Who are those writers for you working right now?
Before I answer this, I have this observation that a lot of very profound soul searching literary texts happen in the Bhasha literatures. That is, they happen in the vernacular, and it takes a hell lot of time before which they are made available in English translation for you to read. for the wider the Western world to read. So as a result, like your understanding of India could be like very much what is it? Very much biased in favor of the Indian English writer. But I am an Indian English writer, but still I would say that there are some really good writers in the vernaculars. For example, like Hindi, Malayalam, Tamil, Telugu, and they have done like work that can illuminate the underbelly of India more than the Indian English writers. There is a Hindi short story writer and novelist by name Ajay Navreya. His name is Ajay Navreya. So he's from Rajasthan. He teaches Hindi literature at Jamia Islamia. It's a college in Delhi. It's a reputed college in Delhi. And he holds a PhD in Hindi literature from JNU. JNU is like a very elite, not really elite, but a very important university in India where like the student activism has like often critique or threatened the government. I wouldn't say threatened the
It was
government,
like
but
a CA
yeah.
protest, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this he has a collection of stories published in English by name Unclaimed Terrain. It's published by an anti-caste publishing house by name Navayana. One of his stories was recently published in this website, Words Without Borders. Probably Iowa University has something to do with that site. I often hear that that there are references made about that site, that website. So this particular writer, though he is a Dalit writer, there are general stereotypes of Dalit writers that they constantly talk about atrocities on them. They constantly talk about Ambedkar. That they don't really transcend. They don't really present a life that transcends all these atrocities inflicted on them. So in a way, Mr. Ajay Navreya transcends these stereotypes. So it's like he can be compared to like poets in the West, like I don't know, Terence Hayes. There is poet Terence Hayes, or like he can be likened to the really transformative writers in the Afro American community who have ventured deep, much beyond what limits them. There is a Hindi writer by name Uday Prakash. Uday Prakash is a like quite an elderly writer with a significant, very significant literary over, like very significant literary output till date, and he has stories that are, I believe, something the world should read to know more about India. So he's a writer like you should read to know more about India, and so probably those who have Kerala roots, they would have heard of a writer by name O.V. Vijayan.
Yes.
Probably this name is familiar to you.
Yes.
So, for example, O.V. Vijayan's fiction or like non-fiction were published by Penguin. There is quite a heavy book of his fiction writing that has been translated partially by himself and by other translators, published by Penguin. So he has some really sharp, very incisive stories about our social life, India, and also I believe that his best novel, it's called Talamurugal. Talamurugal in Malayalam would mean generations in English. So it has not been translated yet, but there are parts of there are excerpts from the novel translated and available here and there. There are a lot of studies. There is a lot of like literary criticisms on his novels. So probably like I even aspire that I translate one of his novels into English.
Who would you say, as you developed your poetic voice and poetic vision, who influenced you, or what influenced you?
I think what influenced me was I wanted to like kind of possess the language. So I'm always I've been always inspired by this poet Derek Walcott, who says, English is nobody's special property. It is a property of the imagination. So it's like, it's like use English language, own up the English language and use it to your benefit. Use it to push the frontiers of imagination. Use it to push the frontiers of inclusivity. Use it to push the frontiers of the cultural memory and history that we are aware of. So when a marginalized writer, be a writer from the tribal background in India, or Dalit backgrounds of Muslims, or queer writers who who overcome insurmountable odds to be where probably I am now, or like to be in conversation with you. So these people, when they write in English and it's like read by the world, it results in a process of, I don't know, in a tremendous process of like it serves an eye as an eye opener.
Mhm.
The world changes. Like we become informed of each other's struggles.
What do you feel is the role of the avant-garde or innovation right now in South Asian literature?
Yeah, in my opinion, the role of avant-garde is the role. It's about like pushing the form of the art form. It's like playing around with the form of the art form, so that the art form becomes elastic to capture newer life experiences. Yeah, for example, like if you look at the history of like probably Anglophone poetry, so like free verse would have been avant-garde at a particular point of time. So today poetry is free verse. So previously poetry used to be strictly in as per rhyme and meter. So somebody started writing in free verse. It was avant-garde for that era, for that time epoch. Similarly, like avant-garde today would be that when people like artists who have lived experiences dramatically different from what has been documented so far, definitely there is a push where the content and form like interpermeate, and as a result there is something called avant-garde form. So it's about, I think, right, I think it's about like some form of elasticity, that, or the intensity in inclusivity of the art form that we look up to uh, during the process, or like when avant-garde art is being created. That
Yes.
would be my understanding. Yeah.
Chandramohan, I want to thank you so much for
Yeah, thanks so much.
sharing
Yeah, yeah.
for sharing your gifts and your intelligence
I
and
was
your point of
pleasantly surprised that, yeah, yeah. I was pleasantly surprised that this opportunity came my way. I'm happy. I'm
view.
happy.
We're the lucky ones.